Hello. So, this morning's Zoom lesson was really fun. I was so glad I got to see you in person, and I'm so impressed that all 14 of you could make it to that first one. So, tell your parents that we have another Bible study one at 1 o'clock again tomorrow. And so, we are going to read a little bit more of The Wolves of Willoughby Chase. Are you ready for that? I already know you're saying yes. I don't have to wonder. Here we go. Simon picked up one of the sacks without much ado and humped it across the garden to the coal cellar entrance, a flat door directly under Mrs. Brisket's drawing room window. Mrs. Brisket unlocked the door and he tipped the coal down the chute and ran back for another load. By the time he returned, Mrs. Brisket had gone indoors, leaving the key in the lock. Simon glanced around to make sure that he was unobserved. The coal man, considering that his help was not necessary, had climbed back onto the seat of his cart and gone to sleep. Simon scooped a handful of snow aside and, pulling a knife out of his pocket, carved from the ground a hunk of yellow clay, which he warmed and rubbed in his hands until it was soft. Taking the large key from the cellar lock, he pressed it vigorously into the clay, first on one side, then on the other, until he had made 2 clear impressions of it. Then he put the key back in the lock, whipped off his muffler, damped it with snow, and wrapped it carefully around the lump of clay, which he placed under some bushes. By the time Bonnie came running back from shutting up the geese, he was hard at work carrying his 5th sack of coal. "Don't you try to carry one, Miss Bonnie," he said with horror as she went matter-of-factly to the cart. "They're far and away too heavy for you." "I'll take them in the wheelbarrow," Bonnie said, and fetched it from the shed. Mrs. Brisket would dock me of my supper if she looked out and saw that I was letting you do all the work. "Does she do that?" Simon was horrified. "Does she starve you?" "Not me," Bonnie said cheerfully. "I soon found out what to do. When she cuts one of my meals, I make up on raw eggs. I didn't much like them at first, but when you're really hungry, it's surprising what you enjoy." "You mustn't stay here," Simon exclaimed. "Will you help us to run away, Simon?" "That I will." "But Simon, if we're to escape, we shall need some clothes. That's what's been worrying on me. She has taken our own things and our purses with our money so that we can't buy other things. And if we walked about in these overalls, everyone would know that we were escaped from the orphan school." "I'll bring you clothes," he promised. "Boys' things would be the best. I go to feed the hens every evening at 6. You can meet me then by the hen houses as soon as you've got the clothes. If you went to Pattern, I'm sure she could give you something." "The difficulty will be to get Sylvia out of the house, for she never has an excuse to come outside except in the morning when she's hanging up washing, and it would be too dangerous then." "Wait till next week," said Simon, "and I'll have a key made to get you out. Can you get into the coal cellar from inside?" Bonnie nodded, all too easily. She locks us into it as punishment quite often. Then I will give you a key to the outside door, and you will only have to contrive somehow to be locked in. Bonnie flung her arms around his neck. Simon, you are wonderful. Now I must fly back or I shall be punished for loitering. What does loitering mean? You need to look up the word loitering. Simon watched until she had run indoors. Then he shied the last lump of coal to wake the driver of the cart from his beery slumbers. Carefully took his piece of clay from its hiding place in the laurel bushes, and holding it as if it were the most precious gold, walked swiftly away to find the nearest locksmith. Sylvia was obliged to miss her tea. Do you remember what tea in England means? Does that mean a cup of tea? It means a meal. She had been given a dress of Diana Brisket's to mend, and the task had taxed her even her skillful needle. So disgracefully torn was its delicate flounces. Her head ached, and her cold fingers were less nimble than usual. Consequently, the dress was not finished when Diane wanted it. Don't forget that Sylvia is really good at needlework. We learned that at the beginning of the book. And that her hands are freezing cold. It's very hard for her to do the job she usually does. And so, it wasn't ready when Diana wanted it. That's not going to be good. Diana flew into a passion. She slapped Sylvia and told her mother that number 98 was lazy and refused to work. In consequence, Sylvia had to stand in the back of the dining room with the other wrongdoers at tea time, while Bonnie burned with sympathetic fury. You know Bonnie's personality. How do you think she feels about watching poor little fragile Sylvia have to stand at the back of the dining room and watch everyone else eat? During sewing time after tea, Bonnie chose a moment when Mrs. Brisket was out of the room. She crept around to Sylvia and pressed something into her hand. Eat it quick before she comes back. Sylvia looked at what it was in her hand and saw with amazement that it was a little cake, crisp and hot from the bakery. Where did you get it, Bonnie? It must be from Simon. I found 2 of them in the nesting boxes when I went to collect the eggs. In other words, the nest where the hens sit. And Bonnie went to go collect eggs, and she found those little sweet cakes. Remember those little cakes that Simon gave them when they were inside his cave? So yeah, it must have been from Simon. If I'd known that horrid wretch Diana would make you miss your tea, I'd have saved mine for you too. And she whispered to Sylvia the news of Simon's plan for them. Sylvia was already pale, but she became paler still with excitement. Escape? Oh, Bonnie, how wonderful. Here, you finish this cake. I think I'm too excited to eat it. And she coughed. No, you must eat it, Sylvia. You had no tea. I can't. My throat is sore. It's too sore. Where shall we go, Bonnie? Does that worry you that Sylvia is getting sick? Well, Bonnie whispered, frowning, we can't very well go back to Willoughby Chase, for they'd search for us there at once. And if James and Pattern tried to help us, they'd get into trouble. What do you say to trying to get to London? To London? Okay, let's stop right there. Why is Bonnie suggesting they might go to London? I need your best guesses. Get them ready. I might ask you in the beginning of our Zoom tomorrow when we Zoom for Bible. Okay.